Okay, so I want to tell you a secret. Actually, it's not really a secret because I've told a couple people over the years, but just in case you didn't know this about me, ever since I really started getting into modeling, I've dreamed of owning one thing, just one thing. It's called a Kemper. And trust me, I know what you're thinking, and it's valid. This guy right here is thinking he's different because he dreams of owning a Kemper. Well, newsflash, buddy, so has every other guitar player for the past like 6 years since its initial release date. But trust me when I say that's when this gets kind of interesting. What you gotta know is that even though the Kemper had been one of those pieces of gear that I always wanted, on the surface, I knew relatively nothing about it. You see, unlike other pieces of gear that I had simped for in the past, I had never actually played a Kemper, and I had literally zero frame of reference or context for how I would actually interact with one in real time. Again, all I knew was that the professionals that I watched on YouTube, they used them, and in my mind, all I wanted to do every day was to emulate their sound. And I'm not gonna lie, Mateus sounds really good here when he's using it. But then again, he always sounds exceptional. But ladies and gentlemen, as always, this is where something really unique started to happen. You see, the date was February 16th, and I remember it specifically because I was having a lot of trouble sleeping. You see, I had crazy insomnia that night because I was overwhelmingly excited about a trip I was about to take to see some of my friends in Philly so we could watch the newest Marvel movie. So I pull out my phone and open up YouTube just to waste a little bit of time, thinking that my timeline is going to be filled with all these Marvel theories and Marvel recommendations. I'm scrolling through, and I immediately notice there's no Marvel content at all. I mean, everything I'm seeing on my timeline is about this. And they keep calling it a Tonex. Okay, well, Mike, that's a cool story and all, but what the heck even is a Tonex, and why does it have anything to do with Kempers? Well, I'll tell you. You see, when this thing came out, everyone and their mother was marketing it as the Kemper killer. And I thought to myself, if this thing really is the Kemper killer like they say, it must have amp models on there that sound 1,000 times better than any of the other high-level amp models on the market. But what I didn't understand at the time was the idea of profiling. Unlike regular modelers, the point of a profiler like one of these isn't just to get a sound that's modeled after a famous amp, like the name would state, but actually to get the sound of a specific amp and be able to capture that sound and bring it wherever you want, whether that be to your home studio or to gigs on the road or to a party where Veronica's gonna be, where she promised she'd finally hear you out and maybe forgive you. And when I finally began to conceptualize all of this, I was kind of flabbergasted. I mean, I was dumbfounded. You're telling me that I can take the sound of my Princeton, not have to carry the actual amp anywhere and just have it, or go to my friend's house and have his vintage Vox and just be able to capture that and then take it anywhere? That's pretty crazy. And I was pretty much immediately ready to put this thing to the test. So I made a video about it, comparing it to like my Dream 65 and to my actual Princeton to see how closely those two could actually emulate the sound of what was coming out of the real amp. And I was ready. There was just this immediate sort of bonding experience that I started having with this thing because the tones were getting, well, sort of unreal. It's weird because usually when there's a new piece of gear or where there's a new concept gear-wise, I'm not the guy to get immediately attached because there's just this sense of like skepticism because of all of the stuff that I used to know and all the stuff that I'm used to. So when it came to something like the Tonex, this was a little bit weird for me, just getting attached to those tones so quickly. You gotta believe me when I say these tones were just chef's kiss, but there was still one weakness that I felt like it had, just one glaring weakness. And I'm sure you could easily guess it, so I'll give you a second. You got it? What'd you think it was? I'll let you know right now. It's 3 words. You ready for this? All in one. Kind of like I was telling you before, even though I really loved the tones that were coming out of this thing, I think my expectations were a little bit screwed up. I expected this to be kind of your one-stop shop, something that you could throw in your bag just with your power supply, you could bring it to a gig, and this is all you would need. And something that would completely eliminate the need for amps, pedals, my entire rig, basically. And I think that's because in my head, there were a lot of negative biases over what most guitar players would refer to as pedal platforms. Now, in case you didn't know, there are basically two ways that people use amp sims nowadays. The first way is as an all-in-one, like we were just talking about, where someone would use like a head rush or a helix to replace their entire board or their entire rig. And the second would be as a pedal platform. And these things are really only meant to replace your amp or your amp sim in your chain. And my specific preference seemed to always default to the former rather than the latter. I mean, why on God's green earth would you ever want to carry more gear if you didn't have to? And those are the types of conversations I would have with all my guitar playing friends. I would be like, dude, I got this new amp sim, it sounds amazing. I really wish that it had all of the multi-effects in one unit. And I noticed something. They started to challenge me on that. Actually, a lot of them started to challenge my ideas.
All-in-one rigs, you know, they're thinking about multiple things: effects, drive, reverb, delay, all of this. Guitar and amp is the two most important elements of sounding good and getting good tone. It's much more simple. There's less of a learning curve associated with things like this. So
all-in-one solution offers a huge range of options. So if I decide that I want a Vox for whatever the sound is I'm going for that gig, okay, which kind of Vox do I want? Which can be great. With an all-in-one, you are sacrificing a little bit of, not tweakability, you have plenty of tweakability, but the ability to quickly adjust something on an all-in-one modeler to the degree that it is on a pedal board. So this is something you're gonna have to adjust sometimes on the fly. Pedal platform allows you to go with an approach more like this. Even if you're using a bigger board, you still have that same tweakability.
Like you were telling me before earlier, if you have a certain drive pedal, if you have a Klon, if you have a tube screamer, if you have that thing you want, that lends itself more to amp in box pedal platforms.
People seem to find it to be especially true of overdrives. People get used to the way that their overdrive feels and sounds, tend to miss that when it's recreated in the digital world.
And so I just sat there taking in all this new information, and I knew it would never really click until I went all in. And as I learned more recently, what better way is there to do that than to build a stereo board and to really see what this thing could do? I think you start to hear a lot about the ways in which your friends, especially like those guys who know more than you, do things or why they do things, and you instantly just start to think like, how can I get the most out of this? And how can I start to just do more? I just genuinely think it's exciting when you're finding new things and when your friends are challenging you in ways that you didn't think you'd ever do them before. I think getting my hands on a second one, that's where the possibilities really started to open up. I've been playing with a lot of stereo rigs recently and have been playing with the idea of using more than one amp at a time. Honestly, I'm less worried about how I'm going to do this. I'm more worried about, do I have enough patch cables to actually get this done? Could run the reverb before the amp, but that wouldn't sound as good. Definitely, I'm going with the Dumble pack. I feel like I'm just trying to copy what John Nathan Cordy does. Actually, I might do Dumble on the left, Fender on the right, but we'll see. I think all I can say is just kind of wow. Stereo is something that's really addicting when you think about it, but just in terms of the Tonex as a whole and figuring out this whole pedal platform thing, the more I use this, the more I begin to like it, especially with the Tube Screamer. Even when I was just listening back to some of those things that I was playing, really getting in the moment, real time, accurate depictions of what the sound was really like in front of my speakers. I was kind of floored. I've had this Tonex for months and months, almost a year, but it's cool to be able to finally unlock more of the full potential with what it can do and what pedal platforms as a whole can do. So yeah, I think the moral of the story is that over the last year, I had to learn that I had a lot to learn when it came to pedal platforms, that it's not necessarily this competition between all-in-ones versus pedal platforms, but it's really about finding out what your needs are and what piece of gear best meets those needs. And once you find out what piece of gear that is, even something that at the time feels like a glaring weakness can become a pretty big strength. And it's especially cool when your friends can challenge you on some of that stuff and show you different sides of an argument or different opinions. And you can then get some really cool results. But anyway, thank you so much for watching. If you want to know anything more about the Tonex, the links are in the description. Make sure to check it out. I was mainly using the ODS Legends pack, which is a group of dumbbells that were recorded and profiled in the legendary Nashville studio. So I'll make sure to link those as well. Also, thank you to my patrons. Like and subscribe if you had a good time. And most importantly, most important of all, have a fantastic day.